Welcome to ADHD Mums. This is for the thoughts that you don't say at school pickup, the ones that sound a bit too honest, a bit too much, but here we say it anyway. No filters, no performance. I'm Jane. Let's jump into it. You take your child to the doctor. You explain what's happening with food. This isn't fussy. This isn't a phase. This is something bigger. You know it is. They nod and then they tell you, I think she'll grow out of it. Maybe it's the tonsils. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe you're an anxious mum and you need to have stronger boundaries. And you leave the appointment and you know that something isn't right, but you also start to wonder whether it is you because no one else is seeing it the way that you're seeing it. I'm not coming at this episode as a host who's curious about ARFID. I have 2 out of 3 children with ARFID and I have one that's really struggling right now. I'm trying to get iron into a child who won't take a tablet. He won't eat the foods. He won't get the blood test. It is a loop of knowing what your child needs, but not being able to make it happen. Going through periods where it gets a little bit better and then it comes back. There are so many parts of being a mum that is very, very difficult. The food situation in my house is by far the most difficult part. For example, Mother's Day. A lot of people talk about going out for brunch, like going out to have a meal together. And it doesn't even matter if it's out or not. It can be a picnic rug at the park. That is incredibly difficult when you have multiple children that don't eat from the same place, won't eat from Woolworths, one won't eat from Coles, one won't go to the IGA. And it's so difficult to do the most basic things, it feels. So it's a conversation I'm very passionate about. And I've been tracking Tracey Jewell-Constable's progress over social media. And I'm bringing her in on this conversation as the person who's going to walk you through what it actually is, what it costs to not be believed, and what it costs to not be believed while you're actually living it. Welcome to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Jane. Oh, goodness, I got teary just listening to that. Welcome to my everyday.
Some of you will know Tracy from her episode last year. We did an episode called Behaviours That Look Like Bad Parenting That Are Actually Neurodivergence. I'm going to pop that episode into the show notes if anyone would like to go back. Most people have known Tracy from her maths season way back in the day, but she's done so many things since then, particularly the Inclusive Mamas Club, and she's currently doing her postgrad in social impact. But most importantly for today, she's a mum who hasn't been believed within this neurodivergent space for a long time, and she's had to push to get her son seen properly, which is such a huge thing. And I've asked her to come back because her son Frankie has been through an enormous few months, including a PEG surgery just a few weeks ago. And I wanted to bring her back to talk about this, such an important issue that is rarely spoken about. So thank you so much to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Jane. I think this is going to be an emotional one today, but I think it's so important and often not speak about.
Absolutely. So we're going to jump right in. For anyone who doesn't know much about ARFID, please go back to my other episodes on ARFID. I'm going to put them in the show notes if you'd like to start from the beginning. Otherwise, we're going to assume that people listening to this know what ARFID is and what the signs are, something not quite right with Frankie's eating. And when you knew that this isn't just fussy eating.
It was all the way through. He didn't want to be breastfed. He was bottle fed. We took him for a tongue tie. There was swallowing issues when we went from bottle to mushy food. So, the beginning days of solid. He just wasn't interested. I remember it was even before thinking that it was autism or anything. Feeding issues was the first things I noticed in Frankie. And I took him to a feeding specialist, OT, from the age of 2. And he, without the ASD diagnosis that came when he was 3.5, for that year and a half, it was like, try this, and nothing worked. We're talking a year and a half of therapies. And looking back on that stage, at no point in that year and a half did they mention maybe you should look at an autism diagnosis. Maybe it's pediatric feeding disorder. Maybe it's his tonsils. Maybe he has hearing, like none of this was mentioned. I literally navigated my way through this. It wasn't the therapist and professionals telling me. It was other mums telling me to look at these other issues that might be occurring. So the whole thing has been really challenging from the get-go with Prankster.
That's actually really disappointing. I didn't realize that. What strategies were you trying?
So it would be playing with food, play-based. But as you know, with ASD kids, Frankie isn't interested in parallel play. He had zero interest in anything I was doing with food. Right? So like that didn't work. So it was all about playing with food. It was like take him to the shops to be around food. Taking Frankie to the shops was a nightmare because of all the noise and smells and people. So that didn't work. So all these strategies that just don't work with ASD, but I didn't know it at that stage. So I'm like, I'll give it a go. And then you report back a fortnight later and like, that's a no. That was a hard no. And that went on for a year and a half. Yeah. I laugh now, right? But at the time, it was so frustrating.
Totally. Like you have to laugh, otherwise you cry. And you kind of graded on how well your child is eating. That's how it feels when they're like under 4. It's like, are they eating? Are they putting on weight? Are they growing? Are they eating a piece of broccoli? Like that seems to be almost a failure and pass mark. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's so much stigma around it. And especially when they start kinder school. I remember because Frankie was in daycare 2 days a week at the age of 2 to 3. And I remember the allowances they wouldn't make for Frankie in terms of like, they're serving kids chicken curries for crying out loud. And I'm just, and the sandwiches with 3 things in them. And I'm like, this isn't going to fly. And I felt like everyone wasn't being listened then. So I remember just packing one of the only things Frankie would eat was rice cakes and like baby toddler puffs. And I would just pack them. And they were like, oh, you need to sign a special form to bring like safe food. And I'm like, I'm not putting peanut butter. Like they're friggin' rice cakes. Like how hard is this? So every step of the way, I look back and I'm like, it was hard all round hard.
Yeah, I remember having 3 kids in daycare because I had them all really close together. But I remember trying to leave daycare and I didn't realize at that point that none of them were eating any food. And then you're dealing with these kids who are like starving. I had no idea that was happening because it was the provided food and you weren't allowed to take anything else.
Yeah. We found that when Frankie attended kindy is I would ask for updates and they would and he'd come home with a full lunchbox. And I'm like, why is nothing eaten in his lunchbox? Oh, he just eat anything. And he goes to an ed support center, like an ed support school with 5 kids in class. And I'm like, you can't provide one-on-one support or feedback to me about why he's not eating. So like, again, it's like this miscommunication between the care providers and the health professionals because eating is 3 times a day, right? It's just, I don't even know where to start with how many gaps we have to face to get a complete picture of our child's eating when we're not always with them as well. It makes it really hard.
Totally. And then the responsibilities on usually the mum. And that's a massive load when you're talking about food is really important for growth and brain development and everything. So it's like, well, if no one's piecing it together, then you're the only one doing that. So like, good luck if you want to have a break because you can't.
Correct. My goodness, I have so many photos and images because obviously you document food diaries, right? And I'd sit there and cry looking over the notes for the next appointment of everything I've tried and everything I tried to cook and how much food wastage there is.
Yeah.
And like, I'd be lucky to get a bite out of like a page of foods that I'd tried, like a bite. Yeah.
I've seen so many people that take this route of grommets, tonsils, and the ENT thing. And that can be a real thing. For some parents, that is a real barrier for a child eating or sleeping, whatever it is. That can be true. I've also seen a lot of people want it to be true. And I understand that when you've got a child that's, for example, really struggling with some explosive behaviors and you're thinking to yourself, if they're not sleeping well, of course, this is why. And you're hoping that that might be the reason. But you've been down the road of all of that as well. And did anyone ever say, hey, maybe it's not this?
Yeah. So, when we were like, hey, have you checked out his tonsils? And we did, he had huge tonsils, huge adenoids. He needed grommet. He was also born without enamel on his teeth and had to have full major dental surgery with 10 caps on his teeth because his teeth was breaking down and painful to eat. So we were like, these are the silver bullets, right? Oh my goodness, this is the reason. Let's do it. We had all the surgeries, made 0 difference. I'm talking, and that was disappointing. That was the grief process because it's almost like you hold on to this hope that, of course, this makes sense. There's a physical reasons. Frankie's not eating. We do it all, no different. And that was the hardest part, the grief of that. It's like, what next now? We've ticked all these boxes. We've sorted out all these physical reasons. Where does that leave us?
I've seen so many parents go down that road and there's a huge grief behind it because it's, I suppose, almost like getting diagnosed with ADHD, taking medication and finding you don't have it. It's like, fuck, well, what is it then?
Yeah. And feeding is so complex. Absolutely. Is there a physical component to it? Absolutely. But so much of it is sensory, psychological, mental. There's so many moving parts to relationships with food. I feel like there's a real gap with multidisciplinary supports. It's like you go here for psych, you go to your ENT, you go to your dentist, you go to your nutrition. Now we're going to gastroenterology. No one talks to each other. You're compiling teams of people by the hour, literally.
So can you talk me through what happens? So let's say you turn up to an appointment.
Yeah. So when Frankie was diagnosed with autism when he was 3.5, we were told by his original feeding team that they didn't have experience with neurodivergent kids and referred us on. And that was it. And they wrote a summary letter of a year and a half of therapy and passed the buck. So then I had to start from scratch with a new feeding team that was very neuroaffirming, I must add, and at least could understand the complexity behaviors of autism and the overlap with feeding challenges. So that was great, but it was like starting from zero to explain all of that to a completely new team. So that's hard, right? And I know anyone listening to this that changes OT or speech or psych, like it's a whole process. Yeah.
When you go there, do they just ask you things that you can't do because of another reason?
Yeah, everyone's siloed. So when this became medical, from seeing a dietitian and a feeding therapist to going the hospital route with a gastroenterologist for feeding tubes, the conversations I'd have with the gastroenterologist and the medical team at hospital and the ped was completely different. All they were interested in was medical. So height, weight, BMI, not the reason for why Frankie's BMI and weight was so low, just the fact that it was. His blood pressure between standing up and lying down, his heart rate. They didn't really ask any questions around what caused this, why are we here? It was just treating him medically, which I was like so surprised.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah.
What about, did you have a pediatrician?
Yeah, so the pediatrician obviously had to write the support letter to the gastroenterologist to recommend peg feeding. Like pediatricians were so short on time. It was a copy and paste job from what the dietitian and feeding therapist provided, right? So like they copy and paste the reports and put it in their referral letters. And this is the thing about all these medical professionals. I feel like as a caregiver, you're not given the time to adequately go through a very complex situation because I don't know, I'm just acutely aware of how time poor they are. And I feel like we're missing and passing the buck.
Totally, totally. So where are we at now, Tracy? Because how did you get from where you've been and where we're describing to actually being in hospital?
Yeah. And like, going to get scary because in over December, January school holidays, Frankie really went backwards with his food. And what was great is his speech was really developing. So he was telling me things about food that I'd never picked up on before. Like, Mummy, it's not fresh. It's not fresh. Can't eat. It's not fresh, over and over again. And the feeding therapist is like, well, because it's school holidays and not school, we're in a different routine. We need to like do a jump start to like see if we can get an interest in food because he was going backwards very quickly over those school holidays. We stupidly decided that maybe going on a cruise ship holiday where you have a buffet and every food you can possibly imagine at your disposal would be the best thing ever. And he didn't eat for 2 weeks, like not a thing. And I'm like, you've got every food imaginable right there.
Only the reason I'm laughing is because we had this happen at SeaWorld Nara Resort. My hubby wasn't there. It was me and a friend and I had the 3 kids and no one ate or drank for like 3 days. And in the end, I left. I left SeaWorld Nara Resort and drove home, right? Because we had to get bottled water from the right coals. Like it was that bad. No one would even drink water. And then my hubby the other day goes, oh, let's go on a cruise. And I said to him, like, I don't think we can survive the cruise.
Yeah, it gets stuck, right? And it was so funny because the first port day was like 5 days in, and I jumped off that cruise ship so fast it would make your head spin. And luckily it was New Zealand, so they had like Woolworths. And oh my God, I remember racing around like a mad woman, smuggling in Frankie's safe foods from Woolworths back onto the cruise ship just to get him to eat something. But he was so kind of in semi-starvation mode by that stage. Even that didn't work. And then I thought, I'm effed here. I had no other option.
Oh, that's awful. You know what I mean? Like you would have looked forward to that break and
Yeah. Yeah. It's traumatized our families for sure in terms of something that backfired so fast. So Frankie was already struggling before that trip. I thought like it was a make or break. And as soon as we got back home, the pediatrician, luckily, an appointment with Frankie straight away, like the next day, as soon as we got home, took his weight, took his height. He had dropped another percentile. Like I want to preface before that holiday, he'd already dropped a percentile. He was already borderline. And then it got so much worse. The pediatrician literally wrote a referral letter to PCH, and within 2 days, we were in hospital navigating a nasal tube feed. Like it made my head spin. It all happened so quickly. They took it so seriously, but it also made me really sad that he had to get to such a critical point to be taken seriously, to be considered for tube feeding.
I always talk about Uncle Ned. It's like the annoying family member. Sorry to all the Neds out there. That someone like Uncle Ned will go, they'll eat when they're hungry. You're at a buffet, every single food available. Like, I totally get it. If it was just a fussy eating thing, eventually they would eat something. But this is the whole point. It's like he was then hospitalized after that trip. And I would have tempted fate probably and gone as well and thought, this could come good. You don't know.
Yeah, I don't know when you get desperate and you've tried so many things for such a long period of time, you'll try anything. You do as a mum. I would do anything for Frankie, and I have done everything I can. And I'm really grateful that the pediatrician could see that, because I was fearful that the medical team in the hospital would say, we can't see you until you've tried X, Y, and Z. With my documentation, that we've tried years of community-based therapy and feeding therapy, because tube feeding is a last resort. It's not going to be your first go-to. You need to have shown that you have tried all these different things. And trust me, we did, and we have.
So you were in hospital. How long were you in hospital for? And then what did the feeding tube do?
Yeah, so the nasal tube, the first time we're in hospital for 2 weeks, because Frankie went into what's called refeeding risk, is when you've been malnourished for so long, your body, it's like going into like a withdrawal. So your body can't, it's like a shock to the system to get nutrients. So he went into sweating, low heart rate, low blood, like his body just went into like a complete shock situation for 3 days. So we needed to come on the other side of that to get him stable enough to accept the nutrition, his body to accept it before he could go home. So that's why we were in hospital for so long. And then nasal tube wise, sensory wise, we had probably until his peg, which is recently, about 6 or 7 hospitalizations per reinsertion, because the poor kid, when Frankie's dysregulated, would keep swiping at it, pulling it out. It was just running while he's attached, like you name it. And the only thing you can do is go back to ED to get him sedated to get it put back in. So that was a whole thing. I reckon he didn't get fed very much for those few weeks because the time the tube was out.
God. And then every time you turn up to the hospital, that would take hours. Fuck, you're a hardy woman.
Because they knew us. It was so funny. By the time I'm on the first name basis with the ED nurses, and they're like, "You're back." And we're like, "We're back." By the end of it, we were in and out in 2 hours. It was amazing. They had everything ready to go. You got to laugh.
So otherwise you do cry. So where are you at now? Like, how is Frankie doing?
Yeah. So what was lucky with all the nasal tube issue was they pretty much prioritized Frankie getting a peg, which is a tummy tube, so a feeding tube directly into the stomach. I'm aware of so many amazing women reaching out to me. They've been on wait lists for 6 months to get a peg, from an NG to a peg, because we have such a demand for it for many reasons, and not enough gastroenterologists to do these surgeries. So we had it within 6 weeks. I mean, so grateful, so grateful. So that surgery went well. We're home. Frankie is able to deal with the feeds through his tummy tube. It's a lot for our family. It's a lot for us to navigate this tube life, but he's growing. He's putting on weight. He's happy. He's alert. I mean, my goodness, like he was dancing in our living rooms for the first time in I don't even know how long to tell you, with so much energy. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what having a child with energy is. Like,
Yeah.
I'm exhausted in a different way now trying to keep up with him. He has so much energy. And I'm so teary because if I didn't advocate as hard as I could, and you see the comparison before what Frankie was like sleeping in his room, lying down 24/7 in his room, not wanting to engage with life, to now wanting to play and play with his train and dance and run around and do a Zoomy. That's why my heart breaks, because I know there's so many mums out there trying to navigate this feeding journey and no one listens to the implications that has for our kids, right? And how much they miss out on because they're not getting the nutrients they need to grow and thrive. And that's what breaks my heart, because I think everyone deserves a pathway that is easy, like should be easier and simpler.
So with a lot of this journey, it sounds like you've had to push, you've had to explain, explain for the millionth time. I read in one of the articles about you having to have freshly cooked crepes available constantly. And I actually read it and just got teary because I was like, I get how draining that is. Like to cook, recook, for it to be not eaten, to not feel like it then, for the air to have touched it in the wrong way or the plate looked different, whatever it is, I hear it daily. That can be incredibly draining to just keep showing up. And we only do it for love of our children.
This is the thing, right? This is what you do for your kids. It's not even a question. Every night I would prepare because, autistic kids love routine, the same rice, and it needed to be the jasmine cup and it needed to be a perfect mound. And as I was walking from the kitchen to Frankie where he was, if the mound moved at all or a bit of rice fell off, I'd have to redo it. Do you know the pressure and the stress of trying to hold a bowl of rice so it doesn't move on a nightly basis? Man, I have that down to a fine art. I could be a Michelin star chef with rice, I tell you what, because I didn't want to redo it, right? I was like, I've got to get this perfect because otherwise I'm going to be back down here doing this again.
I tell you, I understand the pressure. I wash meatballs. So I make it all separate, the spaghetti. Then there's the sauce, because one kid likes the sauce and can only eat it if there's sauce because it's too dry, and the other one likes it just bone dry. So I have to wash the meatballs, and the amount of pressure if I've only got one packet of meatballs, the shop's not open, you can't get another one because it can't be frozen, and everyone checks the freezer. It has to be fresh, this whole thing. And then I'm there and I'm like, if I fuck this up, that's the part that gets me, is the pressure when I'm straining out something and I'm like, I don't have any more of this. It adds so much of a layer that people don't understand, that don't live with it.
Yeah. And it's relentless, right? Because food is to be part of our lives.
It is so relentless. I think Mother's Day really, I found tricky. Some of it was my fault because I didn't communicate clearly to my partner, I'm not dealing with it today. I didn't say that. I thought it was obvious, but he didn't get it until it was laid out. And so I really went hands off. So I didn't do the breakfast, the chasing them, the 3 to 4, whatever it is. And my hubby didn't do it either. The day just went from one to the other because I didn't scaffold them enough in the morning. When people say partway through the day, how was Mother's Day? I just end up smiling and be like, it was really good. And then I feel like the blame, I go back to myself. Well, I should have. If I had have got up early and I had have said, and there's just no break. And the school holidays, all of the days are relentless when they're not going anywhere either. It's just constantly cooking crepes. When you said that in the article, I just was like, I so get that.
Yeah, I am. When you stop and look at it, and I have to say now I don't have the pressure with Frankie being peg fed. I still prepare his meals 3, 4 times a day. That hasn't changed. He still can eat orally. So now I have twice as much work, because not only am I preparing all these meals, I'm also organizing his tubes and his water flushes and his bags of feed. The great news is I don't have the emotional stress and pressure of please eat something, please eat it. I can literally put it in front of him and prepare it. If he doesn't eat it, I'm not going to make it 10 times. It's cool, buddy. You don't have to eat. You've got your peg. But I'm still going through the process. But that emotional release of that, please eat something that I would feel 10 times a day, like the relief and no cortisol, is amazing. So I'm sleeping better and I'm so much more regulated. That's the thing, the mental load of it. The physical preparing and the time is one thing. That's fine. That's a walk in the park compared to the emotional and mental load of please eat it.
And then, eventually agree to eat something and then they don't eat any of it because they just said that to shut you up. That happens to me constantly. And then I'm like, are you going to eat it? Or are you just saying that to make me stop asking you? So, what do you say to other parents or other mums who are out there who are struggling with this?
I think mum's intuition is so important. And I know we've discussed this before, and I know you've discussed this on lots of your episodes, and I know we all know it. And it is hard to be that parent, like constantly knocking on therapist doors for more information. But it's just so important because ARFID is one of those things that a lot of medical and health professionals aren't that equipped and don't have the training. And I think if you believe that it's something, what's the harm in just getting one more opinion? Because I tell you what, and I'm going to share this really openly, I have a lot of guilt right now that I should have done more. And I now know that Frankie has had cognitive decline and failure to thrive as a 5-year-old because he's lived with malnutrition for 3 years. And I feel incredible guilt that I didn't do enough. And now he has cognitive impairments because of that. And, I know I'm working through my grief process with that, but if I can save that to someone else who has a 3-year-old that isn't eating and it's a struggle, if you could just knock on one more door. I didn't do that and I wish I did because you trust the medical professionals and the health professionals, right? You trust what they're doing and saying, but some of them just don't have the training and the expertise. And sometimes you need to keep finding someone that does.
I know it's easy to say, right? I actually just did a solo on why we can't be kind to ourselves. Why do we say nice things to other people and we don't say it to ourselves? And hearing what you've said this episode and the lengths that you went to from a very, very, very young age, I thought that was well above and beyond what I would have done. I don't think I would have done all of the things that you did. I really don't. And I don't know what else you could have done, Tracy. Honestly, I
That's
think
today's
even if
episode.
you're
Thank you for
seeking
listening.
help,
If
let's
you
say
want
you're
that
going
same
to the feeding
podcast
clinic and
energy
you're
in a
thinking
reading
this isn't
form,
working,
the
or there's
ADHD Mum Shop
pediatrician,
is
go
there
and seek
on the
another
website.
opinion.
See you
Yeah,
next
just
week.
another opinion doesn't hurt, right? I think it's better to get another opinion than just continue to worry, or especially if the therapies you're being told if you're seeing a therapist and the therapies aren't working, there's no harm in seeking someone else's perspective and opinion that might have different therapies that might work. I think we need to empower ourselves as carers and parents to take a little bit of that power back and have some autonomy in the decisions for our child. And it's okay to get other opinions and look at resources and training and decide for yourself. I think we put far too much power on some therapists that are amazing therapists, but they just don't have the specific training of, let's just say, ARFID or pediatric feeding disorders, right? And I think we need to, just take some of that power back.
No, I agree. I see so many listeners who write me emails and they'll say something like, we've tried these medications, we're seeing this happening. And the ped came across like it was flippant, like I'm going to write this script. And the mum's there like, have you thought this through? This is going to have a huge impact on our family and my child. And I'm hanging on the edge of sanity. And this is not necessarily a big thing for someone who might be seeing a few different patients that day. So I agree with what you're saying. If it doesn't feel right and you're not sure, there's nothing wrong with asking someone else because I think it can be really important.
Yeah, and the Eating Disorder Family Association and the Butterfly Association have amazing supports and resources for all types of eating disorders, not just ARFID and pediatric feeding, and all types of feeding challenges. And they have a list and a directory of neuroaffirming therapists, and they also have counseling helplines. So if you just want to share, like you don't know what it is, and you just want to share that with someone that understands, they have great resources too.
Great. I think we have nearly finished up. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, Tracy?
I think this is an area that has a lot of stigma, a lot of uncertainty. And I'm just really grateful to be able to share me and Frankster's story in the hope that someone out there that is struggling and feels quite isolated and alone, it might be enough to just get them to reach out to someone. So I feel like that's a win.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time and sharing so openly and honestly. It's such a harrowing experience. I can't imagine how that would have been.
Yeah. But you know what? Advocating as hard as I have, I now have a son who's dancing in the living room while I'm on this call with you.
Let's celebrate that.
So it's all worth it. And I've got a big smile on my face because seeing him happy and nourished and thriving lights up my day. So you know what? Like all that hard work has 100% been worth it, and I wouldn't change anything for the world.
And maybe this episode, and I'm sure it'll be a part of a much bigger picture, we can get more resources in, more training, and better public system support. You know, what you're talking about, people waiting so long can be really detrimental for families. So hopefully that happens. If anyone's listening, share it with a friend, someone who maybe has a child who's a fussy eater, air quoting, who might need support. Thank you so much for your time, Tracy.
Thanks, Jane.
That's today's episode. Thank you for listening. If you want that same podcast energy in a reading form, the ADHD Mum Shop is there on the website. See you next week.